And, again, I think it's quite useful for kind of challenging this idea of wilderness, that we can sometimes, I think this is on the way out, but, a kind of conservation idea that you've got human environments and then you've got wild environments which are completely separate from human beings. And, with indigenous, they live in environments and they've found ways of maintaining them and they've changed them. So any kind of notion that you have conservation where you kick people out, I think is unacceptable politically in terms of social justice, but above all it's unacceptable in social justice. I should probably kind of wind up, but if you're interested in the wilderness stuff, there's a really great, it's all online for free if you search it, William Cronon's The Trouble with Wilderness. William Cronon, by the way, has, I think, done the best book on indigenous and ecology called Changes in the Land. So Cronon is an American environmental historian, and in Changes in the Land he does very, very detailed work in environmental archaeology, looking at historical records. This is not Jared Diamond, it's like very, very detailed stuff. And talks about how the indigenous had an environment and how the white settlers had an environment and how it fitted in with their whole economy and beliefs and so on. And again, as I say, he's most critical of kind of Europeans going, but he would say, the indigenous in New England changed the landscape because they didn't like possessions. That wasn't because they were super green hippies. It was broadly functional that in parts of New England you'd get very hard winters. So you had to be nomadic, so you have to change where you lived in the summer to the winter. So if you're encumbered by, the 17th century equivalent of like the Blu-ray and, TVs and, big furniture and so on, you would be able to move. So they viewed the Europeans as being crazy, and then the Europeans viewed them as being primitive because they didn't acquire lots of material goods in a environment that was very, very rich. But he points out what they did like was having huge fuck-off fires. So a lot of the environment, had been deforested and you got parklands. But anyway, his Trouble with Wilderness is like the key thing to read on wilderness and wilderness ideology, and how this idea that you have like an untainted wilderness is, utterly reactionary. I mean, you think of England where, where you'd have Capability Brown and landscapes that mimic nature, and they'd like, get the 17th century, 18th century equivalent out of bulldozers and destroy the village because you wouldn't want the village messing up your natural view. So quite often we've had like national parks which just wanted no human activity. And he talks about American national parks. To this day, for instance, the Blackfeet continue to be accused of poaching on the lands of Glacier National Park that originally belonged to them, and they were ceded by treaty only with the proviso that they be permitted to hunt there. The removal of Indians to create an uninhabited wilderness, uninhabited as never before in the human history of the place, reminds us just how invented, just how constructed the American wilderness really is. So what do we do all about this? Well, I think the main thing is really find out about indigenous people, and I think that the best organisations are actually run and organised by the indigenous, and it's kind of easiest if you can read Spanish, but let's face it, I can't really speak in Spanish, it's not that difficult really, Spanish, it's kind of, Google Translate and so on. So there's things like, as I say, AIDASEP have got a brilliant website. My friend Hugo Blanco has got a newspaper called Lucha Indigena, Indigenous Struggle, which has got a website. And the easiest thing is just to look at these things fairly regularly, find out what's going on, and give solidarity where necessary. If you don't read Spanish, what's also great is Survival International, do good stuff. And again, Hugo Blanco, somebody's indigenous, say, oh, they're really great, and they do good campaigning. So they're certainly worth looking at. Although, as I say, it's most interesting, I think, when it's stuff from, indigenous, and to repeat for the 12th time, certainly in Latin America, they're very, very strong. Very, very good website is Intercontinental Cry, so I definitely write that down. So it's all in English, run from Canada, and they've got, as good as Survival International, but they tend to run more stuff. So they will have stuff right around the world that, for example, you might have Mayan people in Guatemala, and you might have gold companies who want to take their lands, and then there'll be action alerts and people to write to. So I definitely, all of that kind of stuff, look at that. If you're serious about the environment, Indigenous people are doing so much to protect the environment and are getting kind of so strong. And I think, without dissing Greenpeace or Friends of the Earth, or, even saying you shouldn't be spending a whole lot of time in the Green Party, I think that real priority to kind of look at this stuff, engage. I mean, I just am into this stuff just from, accidentally knowing one person, engaging and getting more into it. And all the time there are these kind of campaigns. And I'd certainly say that it's something which is an intellectual thing. And obviously, if those of you are in the anthropology department, anthropology with all its disputes and research and so on, you're going to be engaging with this. But, I would certainly say read more about it, find out more about it, because it's certainly very, very good at disrupting a lot of the kind of assumptions that we've got. So certainly at the moment, the two ways of kind of framing the environment is we've got this very kind of Malthusian, we're really fucked unless we stop having children, reduce the population, have a really miserable fucking time, cut our consumption massively. That's kind of one way of framing it. And then the other is, well, don't worry, the market will sort it out, and technology. And, what I think is very good about the Indigenous, particularly the kind of 7-generation rule and common poor property rights and all the economics, is actually saying, there's other ways of running an economy and society which are maybe more practical that we're not even really thinking about. And then to finish off, to be kind of slightly party political, if you think of the slave trade, the people who opposed the slave trade didn't say, let's just drink, tea and make sure we have sugar which is, ethical, which hasn't been produced by slaves. And if we keep doing this, it will eventually become uneconomic to have slaves. We're not really going to solve a planetary crisis by worrying about what goes in our bins. I mean, don't take me out of context. I'm not saying don't recycle. But, I sometimes get slightly angry when it comes to kind of lifestyle. That, what it's about is rethinking our culture and our economics. And even if you don't get into that kind of stuff, it's, most of the time you've got resources being stolen from people being murdered to get them, the human rights being abused, people being lied about, and that's the kind of central thing, not just our plastic bags. So to me, there's always a kind of politics that you have property rights and political systems, and you have to change those. I'm not especially big on kind of post-structuralist philosophy, but Deleuze and Guattari talk about deterritorialization. So, kind of Europeans went into Latin America and deterritorialized it, that basically took the means of governance and rules and ripped them up and destroyed them. And, to me, there's a kind of political thing where you've got to be involved in politics, make changes, and actually re-territorialise and come up with rules and things that work. So I should stop there anyway. And you've got lots of resources, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.